Okay, so voila, as you can see, I have trimmed off 1/8 of an inch around this top part. That's going to help us with turn of the cloth when we flip this collar right side out. So now we need to baste this piece down, and even if yours was glue on, you should still do this step with me at the sewing machine. So we need to just align the top edges, actually, not worry about them matching at the bottom. And you're gonna have to get some pins out and pin it in place. And yes, you are gonna probably have to stretch it out, possibly a little bit. So I might even suggest that you do this cutting and stretching step first before you iron glue fuse it down. Because you're gonna force this, see, you can already see as when I forced them to match, it wants to curl, and this is good. That means it's gonna flip right side out much easier and better. So let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, as you can see, I pinned it, and you'll notice that I stretched it to fit perfectly, matching the top edge. Make sure your notches match first, then you do the rest of the pinning. And yes, you'll notice that because the interfacing is shorter and this fashion fabric is a little bit larger, that it's gonna kind of make like a kind of a like pocket shape, but this is what we want. So make sure you stretch it to A, match the notches, and B, match along this top edge. Then we need to do a holding stitch at the inner width of the presser foot. So it should say on the guidelines the seam length, stitch length. So my machine's a little different, so I don't quite have the same increments. Alrighty, or I think it was outer width of the presser foot. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's outer width. So it's just kind of a looser stitch to just hold this in place. Foot down, back stitch. Go slow on curves. The edge should always match up here, even though it's not over here. I'm more concerned about it always being right there when I'm going around a curve. There we go. Make sure that you attach this with the fashion fabric facing outward, fashion side, and the inside underneath. And so you'll just go around, and do not do it on this bottom part. Okay, so here is that stay stitching. Here's the right side of my fabric, right? And the interfacing is on the wrong side. And you notice that the fashion fabric is bigger than the interfacing, but watch, here is where turn of the cloth became really important. So when I turn this cloth, they actually end up matching. You'll notice just kind of like how they don't bubble anymore. And there's that turn of the cloth. This green fabric needed to be longer so we could go around that curve. Because, right, this is a collar. It needs to be able to do this kind of a shape. Plus we're, you know, doing another layer and turning it inside out, right side out I mean. Okay, so now we're ready to attach this to the other fashion fabric piece. So what we need to do is, if this is the fashion or right side, this fuzzy part is my fashion, whereas this green is not. So right sides together, the interfacing is on the back here. Match them up, matching notches first, and then we're going to pin I'll start with my notches. Get those matched up. One more notch to match up here. Okay, now then I'm going to match up the curved edges. And I'm not going to worry too much about the bottom. We're not sewing the bottom closed. That needs to stay open. Otherwise, you can't turn this inside out and you can't attach it to the shirt. So don't sew this shut. Now it's kind of getting a little different there, but that's fine because it's on the bottom. I'm not too worried about it. I think it was just some uneven cutting. So that's a moment of reflection on why it's so important to cut your pattern pieces out as exact as possible. Though luckily that was not in a very important place for me, so it's not going to matter too much. Making sure they match just by rolling it a little. Okay, so now we're ready to sew this. So this needs to be sewn all the way around the top at 1/2 inch. Alright, so it's time to sew. And this time it needs to be, instead of the outer width of the presser foot, it needs to be 1/2 inch. So go slowly around curves, and you can change the stitch length, I think, back to the machine default, something around 2.4, 2.5. Doing these curves is going to be really important because this stitch line shape of your curves is going to determine the final outside shape of your collar. So this is where I really strongly recommend you really practice sewing around a curve, Because otherwise, if you don't, then your collar is not going to be even or not have curved edges. So be very mindful of that. Okay, so you should end up having something that looks like this. The two lines close together, and then there's the two layers of fashion fabric. Before we turn this inside out, make sure you did it right. So to test that, you just do this, and you say, oh, the interfacing is on the inside, fashion is on the outside, fashion is on the outside. Did it right. If that doesn't happen, you need to go back and assess the way you layered your fabrics. So it should be wrong side, right sides together, and this was attached to the back side, wrong side of one of those pieces. Now we need to trim off about quarter, it's gonna probably end up being 1/4 of an inch, so we need to trim it right down to about, just barely leaving maybe 1/8 of an inch left of the outside line. Do not trim to the inside line because that one does not attach all three pieces together. So you're gonna do that. Alright, voila. So here is the edge trimmed down. And now we're ready to start attaching this to the shirt. Okay, so now to attach, get your shirt laid out, have your neckline visible, and basically what we need to do is have your inner facing side up, get your pins, and this is where it gets a little tricky. So I'm going to open it up. I only want to look at this layer. And basically, if this is the fashion right side, what I want to do is attach these together. And it's going to be a little tricky, especially in these little corner parts. So I'm actually going to start maybe over here with some of these notches. So I have 2 notches here, 2 notches here. I'm going to start with those. I'm going to match them up. And so notice I'm pinning the right sides together because then they'll make the right kind of fold in the right place. So this part is a little difficult, I'm not gonna lie, but just watch and repeat what I'm doing and you should be fine. Okay, I have one. So I'm only touching this one layer of fabric at the moment. And I'm just going to worry about matching up this other notch second thing. Okay, then I'm going to focus on getting the rest of it to match. Here's an area of discrepancy. One of these pieces ends up short and one of them ends up long. I'm going to opt for the one that's longer, matching the top edge, and this shorter one, it'll just kind of it'll wind up being inside the seam anyways. It'll be fine. Okay. Same thing over here. It's a little more dramatic now. So again, I think I'm gonna opt for, maybe I'm gonna compromise. I'm gonna go kind of in the middle, I think. Or if I match this one, the longer one, it's kind of big. So maybe halfway. So I might just need to trim that off at some point. You're just doing the best you can here to match them. Make sure that your seams, this shouldn't be an issue, but if you watched my Ironing Princess seams video, so your seams should already be flat and open. If they're not, you need to make sure that is the case. Now I'm running into another issue where one is bigger than the other. So I'm going to have to use that method where I just kind of force it to do what I want it to do by stretching it and finding the middle. My top edges aren't quite matched up, but that's okay. I can fix that. So again, stretch them open together, pinch the middle, stick a pin in there. Still a couple little loose gaps, so just continue that method. Stretch, pinch the middle, pin, stretch, pinch the middle, pin. Why not? I might as well throw in one over here just to be on the safe side. Okay, now when we get to these outer edges, this placket needs to be folded and sewn shut already, or you can't do this. So I have more information in my other tutorial about plackets. This placket ended up being a little bit long, a little bit longer than the fabric, so I'm just gonna, it's annoying me, I'm just gonna trim it to what it should be. That's better. Oh, come on, cooperate with me. There we go. The fabric gets a little thick there, you know, now that's like 4 layers of fabric, but it should be matching exactly, or at least a little bit close to the inside corner. So if it's not, you need to reassess what happened. Okay, let's go to the other side now. And if you're really worried about it not matching in length, just stretch it. See, now I made it match perfectly. You can force the fabric to do what you want it to do. Most of the time. So I'm going to go back and, I'm going to do that. I'm going to force it to stretch. Hey, okay. And looks like that. They match now. Alright. Time to sew this at 1/2 inch. Okay, so once it's sewn, we put the right sides together, then you'll see that it's going to turn pretty nicely. So attached, this is what it should look like. Absolutely no tucks, no gathers. This is why you need to pin very slowly, take your time, and you need to sew very slowly, take your time. It is doable. You just have to, again, like I said, just take quality time to do this. Don't rush it. So this is what it looks like when we first put it, just kind of laid it around the neckline, and we took that, we have this interfacing layer and this fashion layer, but we put the right sides together and we sewed the right sides together. Before we move on, we actually need to trim that seam line down. We're probably going to trim it down maybe half. Let's say half. Trim it in half, reduce the bulk in the seam, and you can even snip the corner off there to get it ready for turning inside out. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I just finished trimming that edge, and if you did everything right when you fold it inside out, it should look something like this. That final stitch line that sewed all three pieces together is what determines this curve line, so if you're not happy with it, then you probably need to go back and reassess that. So yeah, I think I'm mostly happy with mine. And we need to do this thing now where we pin it to get it ready for ironing. So I don't want this crease up in the top middle. I actually want it to be slightly to the inside so that it forces the collar to want to maintain a certain orientation and shape throughout its life. So basically I'm holding these together and with my thumb I'm pulling down this front piece, if that makes sense, and pinning it. Same thing here. Roll it down with my thumb, pin it. So this, you want to be able to see it from this side, don't see it from this side. That's what we want. Let me show you what not to do. Don't do this where you just have it on this top edge. I don't want that. I want it rolled down. So again, you can't see the seam, it's on the top. Roll it down so that we force it on the inside. So you're going to do that all the way around and then get your stuff out for ironing, because we have to iron this before we close it. Okay, once you've finished pinning this seam line towards the inside, then I just really quickly want you to just try and iron it a little bit, just to get it to listen, to stay put, before we begin the next part of the sewing. Not going too crazy, I'm just trying to get that to stay the heck down. Okay, so I finished ironing just a tad, tiny bit, ironing the seam towards the inside of the shirt so that it's not directly on top. And I'm going to leave my pins for this next part. So here is the next step. Basically, we have to take this layer and fold it to, so this was our first line that attached this back piece. We're going to fold this under and match it up with that line. That is now a guideline for pinning. And now I'm running into this issue where I have this corner that doesn't want to behave. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the bulk in this corner by going to the inside and trimming the corner. Let's see, that might help it. I think that's gonna help it. Yeah. That helped a lot. Okay. So now I should be able to do this. So I just manually, oh, you know what, I need to trim the other corner off on the other side. It's giving me issues as well. It's totally okay once you've sewn something together and it looks good and you don't need to take it apart. It's good to just trim those corners off to reduce bulk. Okay. Yes, this corner is always the trickiest because I'm trying to tuck everything underneath. Okay, right there, perfect. Nice. I'm gonna pin that. And then just keep going. So try to match it up with the line as much as you can, and hopefully your line is pretty even, because if your line is not even, then it's not going to be a very good guideline, is it? Again, another place where the domino effect can really happen and affect your work. So, you know, you do one small thing in the process not very well, and it will affect the rest of the process and garment. Okay, so basically you're just going to do this folding process all the way to the other side. See how it is lining up there with that previous sew line? That's what we want. We also don't want to accidentally create any tucks or gathers on the back, so just once in a while, just look behind here. Just make sure it's all right. I'm leaving these pins in. I might take a bout. I ironed the seam forward, so now it shouldn't cause problems. So as you pin this across, you can take the top pins out. So do it this way. Alright, let's get that pinned. Alright, so I have finished pinning it. So as you can see, it's nice and smooth, matching up with that line underneath from the previous stitching. Also, these seams, these shoulder seams are open and flat. And again, if you followed my video about ironing princess seams, then they should have already been ready to go flat. If not, you need to figure that out. In terms of the sewing, it's basically inner width of the presser foot, and we're going to go all the way around the outer edge and set your stitch length to a little bit looser. I recommend 3.0 millimeter stitch length instead of the standard 2.4 or 2.5. And I'd like you to try and follow this shape. Again, inner width of the presser foot. So I'm going to start with the hardest part, which is the this edge here that I want to close. So I'm probably going to have to tackle it from here. Inner width of the presser foot. Make sure my needle stays in if you're using a machine. It got a little bulky there and my machine just didn't want to budge, so I kind of had to help it a little. And make sure you don't create any tucks either with the fabric underneath. And my string is getting in the way. I'm gonna get it out of the way. There we go. Remember to follow the curve of your collar as well. Take your time, make sure you're doing quality work. Okay, finally getting close to the curved edge here. And make sure your machine, if you're using one, is set to the needle staying in the fabric function, because that's going to be critical for turning this corner, which is not really a corner. Okay, lift my foot and get this turned. Okay. Now I need to follow the curve. Okay, now on to the next curve. Alrighty, let's take a look at that now. Ooh, yes, so from the outside, there's no tucks, right? No gathers. And same thing here, no tucks, no gathers. It matches up fairly well. the line is pretty pretty uniform. I got a little wobbly on the corners still. I know that's a kind of a hard part to do, but it's okay. Just do your best. Alright, and that is the collar video. Now I got a nice stiff collar, and you know, I recommend you just iron these collars one more time, just get them nice and flat and get out those creases.